22 Nova Scotians tragically lost their lives last weekend in the shooting and arson spree, the worst mass killing in Canada's history. And look, well, nobody doubts the bravery of the RCMP men and women who rush into harm's way to protect our lives every day, and especially the heroic work of Constable Heidi Stevenson, who was killed tragically trying to protect the people of Nova Scotia. She's the best example of that kind of bravery. Still, these devastating events are raising very difficult questions. Why was no emergency alert issued to warn the public about a killing spree that lasted almost 13 hours? Do rural communities have enough RCMP resources to protect them from this kind of threat? Let's find out. I'm joined now by former RCMP Deputy Commissioner Pierre-Yves Bourduas and former Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner and current CTV Public Safety Analyst Chris Lewis. Gentlemen, always a pleasure to have both of you on the program. Pierre-Yves, let me just start with you. The question that most Canadians are asking, they get these emergency alerts for an Amber Alert, for a tornado, for COVID. Why was an emergency alert not given in 13 hours to the citizens of Nova Scotia?
Well, the initial responders, their main concern was, of course, to address the scene, the chaos, the carnage that they actually witnessed when they first attended. And then there's just one road going in and out of the scene there. And according to the RCMP, they were within an hour, hour and a half, they were about 25 RCMP personnel on location. They were looking at a 2 square kilometer area, wooden area, and they cordoned off the area, and they were under the impression that the gunman was still located in that specific area. Hence the reason why they thought that they had contained the gunman and the area. They had cordoned off the area. So they were under the impression that everything was cordoned off. The problem, though, is that at 6:30, when the girlfriend actually showed up the scene there from the wooden area where she was hiding, that's when she provided enough information for the officers to know that they were dealing with someone that had a replica of a marked police car and was dressed as an RCMP officer. So according to the RCMP, between 7 and 8 o'clock, they knew who they were dealing with, and they thought they had contained the area, right, which obviously was not the case.
But Chris, I mean, we know this is the girlfriend who was beaten and handcuffed and then gave the police warning, but that still was hours and hours and hours and hours left in the killing spree, unfortunately. People didn't get warning. The U.S. consulate warned their citizens of danger in an email. Canadians got a tweet. Chris, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, I certainly think they should have, in hindsight, maximized the communication. But at the same time, and it's not an excuse at all, Evan, but the reality is that comm center's never been faced with this before. And those other alerts that have gone out on COVID and other things haven't come from the RCMP. Those are EMO type situations. So they didn't think of it. They did what they normally do. They put it out on social media, and they continued on dealing with the worst tragedy they've ever dealt with. So, I mean, this is a lesson learned for sure. Going forward, it's a policy issue and a training issue, but you know, it's a tough one to really second guess given everything that's happening.
Although, to be fair, PY, the Premier, and I've spoken to him, they had their own center standing by waiting to get the order from the RCMP to get it there. Clearly the province was just waiting to utilize that tool, and it wasn't used. The other factor is, and PY, this guy was dressed as a cop. He had an RCMP uniform on. He had a replica car. How easy is it for people to get hold of that stuff?
Well, it's, again, on the average, the RCMP would report over a period of a year about 200 uniform going missing or even like stolen. But it's certainly not easy. You'll be able as a collectioner to buy, you know, a few replica or, you know, memorabilia from the RCMP. But on the overall, it's not something that is easy to obtain online, you know. So there's a lot of questions that are unanswered, and hopefully the investigations will provide answers to the community that wants to know.
Chris, the big question, Justin Trudeau says, you know, we are eventually going to pass some gun control legislation on this. We don't even know. I know some of the guns came from the U.S. We don't know really much more than that. But is that a big issue where this guy got the guns, and would gun control, would, you know, here we go back again to the long gun registry, would that have made a difference?
Well, we don't know. Well, once we find out where those guns came from, how we acquired them, then we'll have to look at where there are loopholes in the gun control system that allowed that. I really, at face value, one handgun and some long guns. I don't know that changing the laws is going to change what occurred there. I mean, ultimately, going forward, hunting rifles are hunting rifles. Handguns are wrong. They shouldn't have them unless they're, they've proven to be not criminals and not dealing with serious mental health issues that makes them a threat. But regardless, I mean, the Yonge Street attack with a car resulted in a whole pile of awful deaths, and he didn't have a gun. So I don't know that this is a big gun control discussion.
Interesting. PY, the other issue, and I think this is critical, the RCMP resources, are they adequately resourced in rural areas? In this particular situation, they were stretched across 16 different crime scenes. Is that something that we got to look at now?
Well, I would suspect that in the coming months, the RCMP will definitely look at rural policing, because I'm dating myself here, but there's a marked difference between rural policing in 1975 when they started in rural New Brunswick and now. And Chris, I invite your comments on this, but organized crime is migrating from urban areas to rural areas as well. And that is something that needs to be looked at, because rural policing is certainly not the way it used to be, and there ought to be discussions within the RCMP with different levels of government. And you're keenly aware also, Evan, of the fact that the RCMP has been unionized, and there will be discussions in the coming months with regards to union representations and different levels of government to discuss, I would imagine, rural policing and the appropriate level of resourcing with regards to this particular type of policing.
Gents, I know your thoughts and hearts are with the people of Nova Scotia as well. Yeah. I really appreciate that, Chris Lewis and P.Y. Bourduas. Good to see both of you with some interesting perspective, of course.